Hello, welcome. My name is Manuel from Kata Studio. Today we are going to learn how to create bubble text effect like this. Okay, now we are not just going to learn or jump into learning this. We are practically going to understand every little detail that makes up a bubble text effect. By the way, if you want to learn how to create a mascot logo like this, scroll down and through our YouTube channel. You're going to see the content and you're going to practice with us. So for today's tutorial, we are only going to focus on learning to create bubble text effect. I've received several questioning on how to create this if in case you want to create a custom font like the one we'll be making for today. So you can practically find bubble fonts on Google. Just search for free bubble font text. You're going to find a bunch of them. They are out there in handy, pre-made with all of most of these effects. But today we're going to learn how to create it customly. Possibly you want to use a custom illustration to make a logo like so, and you need bubble effects on your text. So we're going to point out every little thing that makes up this kind of effect. Very good. So number one, the most important thing you need to understand in bubble effect is that it works best on gradient. So when you apply a gradient on a text, it makes more sense on bubble effect because a bubble effect usually have a light reflection, and for a light reflection to happen, there should be a gradient effect showing that there is a part that the light is casting more than the other part. That's number one. Number two is the bubble text effect have a light reflection. So as you can see, all these effects from here, all these lights, let me zoom very closely so you can see all these white edges, as you can see from here, are part of the core features of this effect. Okay, these are the core features of this effect. Why these are important is to make sure you understand that this light is coming from a particular perspective and actually making it look as though it is wet. The text itself being wet, it have the effect of bubble. And why it's a little bit related to bubble, wet being related to bubble, or wet text being related to bubble, is the effect is not going to shine if the text is dried. So for instance, a lollipop, if you see a lollipop, a light casting on a lollipop, you usually see this kind of effect. So that is where it, and lollipop usually have rounded corner or rounded edges, and that's where the effects name bubble font emanated from. Another important thing you need to learn about or take very considerable about a bubble font is the rounded edge text. Though there are some texts we can override these practices on, but they still have that effect and still would work well if we apply this effect on them. Okay, so number four is a bubble text usually have a bold stroke. So bold stroke all around it, as you can see here, all this bold white stroke around it is very core important part of it. Why? It separates the text itself from the background or the base background. The background is this, I'm not talking about the white background, I'm talking about the base background, means this circle that is guiding around this text. Okay, so if we remove that white stroke around this, it wouldn't make any sense anymore because this text itself will be reflecting or we'll be having a contrast issue between the text and the elements in the background. Remember, a mascot logo usually have multiple layers of colors, and to separate these stuffs are things that make your design difficult, mascot design especially. So you should bear that in mind. You put a stroke on, you can put a stroke of different colors. You can see the second layer of text or this bottom text have a stroke of brown, okay, still on brand with the stroke we have around this, and this other one have a stroke of white pointing on the milky effect we have here. A bubble effect usually have a backdrop layer. Backdrop layer, for instance, as you can see, this particular element, this funny element, is what makes it difficult for the background to show from inside of the text. So it's not enough putting on strokes. If the strokes are not heavy enough to cover these parts over here, okay, then that is where we may need to apply that effect by the back side of our text. Another most important thing is, in most cases, a bubble text effect might want to have an overlay. So there should be overlay text over the other, another text over the other, and so on and so forth. If you're placing text, as you can see, this text is going over this K, this T over this one, and so on. You just have to play around with your stuffs and see what you come up with. Enough of those rules and regulations. Let's get into work. So for this, we built a custom font. As you can see, I just have to take care of the difficult part so that we can just play around. So we have this effect and we want this to actually pump out. So what we need to do is to separate the circle itself from this layer. So we select everything and we select on shape builder, click on that and hold out key, ALT, hold the out key and click on this and click on this and click on this. Now as we are done with that, you can use the direct selection tool to now select. We see that we can't even select the circle, which means we have cut out this circle from, this is how to actually cut out a layer from another. I have a tutorial on this, actually. You can check that out. I don't need to talk much about this. So what we simply did was to use that circle to cut a circle inside of this one and dismiss the circle we just created. The same applies to effects you can use on cutting out any of the layer in Illustrator. So now we've gotten that. The next thing we need to do is to apply our gradient. But before we do that, let's separate this text. This is very important. We need to separate this text one after the other so that we can actually create things the way we want. You can separate these before while you're typing it out, but once we rasterize it, because this text is actually rasterized, so you can separate it by duplicating it like so. Okay, I'm just teaching you the basic way. I don't want to go more advanced way of separating text, even though they are laid like so. Okay, as we have separated that, we need to erase the first one. You can go and select the eraser tool. This is a very simple way to do it, and erase this first one. Okay, and you can erase the second one. Just leave one circle. Let's erase all of the circle, and we just need 3 and 0. We select on this other one. We do the same. So we're going to erase all the circles from here just quickly. So once we're done with that, we need to just place this circular by the side. So we have this separately selected, and we hold the Alt key and we separate it, and we hold Alt key again and we separate it. But before we get into this, let's do something very quickly. We are going to delete this and we're going to work with only 3 and 0. So the rest, any effect we apply to the 0, we are going to duplicate it, and we don't need to stress ourselves replicating those effects on the rest 2 zeros. Now, first rule here, we talked about gradients. So let's apply our gradient here. But first, we need a base background to separate this text from what we have here. Okay, that base background is what is going to be the guide of what we are doing. So we select a rectangular tool and we draw a line around the 3 and 0. Let's just draw a longer line. Select option, arrange, and bring it to the back. So we're sending it to the back right now. Then we can change the color to whatever color we want. Let's just make it a little bit of okay, let's make it a little bit of brown, lighter brown. I think this okay. I don't even like this color. Let's make it a gray. Okay, I think this is fine. So you just want to separate it from the background. That's the idea, so that we don't have that. So we can lock it right now. So now we're done with that. What we need to do is we could place this 0 over this 3. But before we do that, let's apply gradients on our text, which is the first thing we may need to do, not must need to do. We may need to do. So we apply a gradient effect, select the one we think we like the most. Like this is very cool for me. You can pick on any color. Any color actually can work with this. So we're picking a dark color and we want to apply our stroke around. So select on this, let's apply. You can just select on the both, select on stroke, and we increase our stroke amount. As you can see, we are having an issue over here. To avoid that, click on this option and show more. Once you show more, you need to disable the cap and also disable the corners. So this cap and corner, cap is for strokes that have sharp edges. The cap will make the edge rounded. We don't have a stroke that have a sharp edge here, but then we enable that and also enable the corners. The corners will make that edges smooth. So once we have that off the way, that is not all. The problem we are having here again is that the stroke is now overlapping on our text, which won't even give us the opportunity to do our effect. So select on it again, and here it says stroke alignment. We are going to pull it outside. So click out and you see the stroke is now outside of the text, giving us opportunity to play around with what we have. So we're done with number 2. We have done with adding the gradient. We are done with adding our stroke, as you can see from here. Okay, one thing we can do is to change the stroke color. Let's select on the stroke color. Once you select a stroke, you can still change a color from here. If you click on this, you are changing the base color. Click on this, you are changing the stroke color. So we select on this and we give it a stroke of, let's try to play around with a stroke that is closer to what we have. I think this is too bright. Or should we even leave it at brown? Let's go brown since the color itself is gray. Now, this is very important to note. You see this white one we have over here. Okay, the color is white because the brand itself is red. We don't have a variant of red that actually can fall in for red itself. Well, we have a variant of yellow, which is brown. Brown is a core variant of yellow, a color that can work very well with yellow if you are talking about stroke. I'm not talking about color grading. Okay, so this is very well understandable, and do not use colors that are very, very out of the way. So fine, we use this color which is brown, and I think it works perfectly well. We can go down a little more brown. Fine, I'm good with that. So now you see we are done with our second level. Now we can place this above this if we want. This is another effect. We talked about this, overlaying a text over the order. So now the next thing we need to do is to start applying our effect. Now, mind you, I talked about the backdrop before now. Now, not every design that requires the backdrop. As you can see, we don't even have a problem of backdrop here. When you use backdrop, it's like when you are using a stroke. For instance, let me show you what it means. We are using a stroke of 1 or 2, and we are still having this empty space from here. That is when we can apply a backdrop of brown. And to apply a backdrop of brown, just draw something over the layer or area you want to do that, and change the color to the same color, and go to your layer area and actually send it backward from here. Just look what I'm doing. Look at the element from here. So we want it to go backward till it gets to this 0, so we can pull it from our layer panel. So when we place it here, look exactly at what happens. So it goes to the back and fill in that space. So as you can see, fill in that space, and when we delete it, we still have that space. So we select on this and make our stroke 4. Now, you should be very careful about stroking. Don't make your stroke too much. There is a level of stroke you can give to this. It becomes too much and it becomes a problem. It won't allow your design shine. Stroke of 4, depending on the layer size you are creating your design on. If you are creating your design on an artboard of 500 times 1000, it's a different stroke amount. If you are creating the same design on a layer of about 2000 times 2500, it is a higher stroke you may need. So bear that in mind. Don't say because I use 4 stroke on any layer, you're going to use 4 stroke. Do it until you are comfortable, visually you are comfortable with what you have. So now we have that done. Let's start applying our effects over it. We are talking about the light reflection, which is going to make this look a little bit nicer. So now at this point, I want to do something, play around with this text. Should we use a line? Okay, let's draw a line. Okay, we draw a straight line like so, and you see the effect we applied to our stroke is still following it. So we don't need that. Let's untick that. We want a sharp edge. Then you get to profile. We want at the profile, we want it to be sharp at the first edge and lean at the other edge. That's number 2. Now we want to curve this a little down like this. Okay, but the problem, we can't start applying this effect now because it's not giving us exactly what we want. What do? We reduce the width of the stroke. Just reduce the width of the stroke a little. I think this is okay. I think this is fine. Okay, this is 1, and 1 is not very okay for me, and 2 is not still very okay for me. So let's go 1.5. To do that, just click on this particular value area, 0.5, 5. That's just all you need to do, and hit on enter to give you exactly that value in between 1 and 2. So we have our first effect. As you can see from here, we have our first effect. Then the next one, we can start applying our effect here. Now what makes up this particular other part of effect is we are going to put a dot and we are going to put a line, just a reflection, a dot and a line, a dot and a line. So let's first put up our dots. So we put our dots at this edge and we are going to put a line. Just going to draw a line. Okay, and that doesn't even have a stroke at all. Fine. So at this particular one, we are going to make the edges curved, not as sharp as this other one. So we click on this to make it rounded like this. I think that is even too long. Draw it closer. Then let's pick it and drop in here. We must want to make it to be the same size as the dots here. So instead, if we are comfortable with the size we have here, we have to reduce the size of the dot. But if we are not comfortable with the size we have here, we have to increase its own size. So we can make it 2, so it can be higher, or let's say 1.5 also. Fine. So we curve it a little more with the, look at what we are curving it with, the curvature tool. So we curve it a little like this. Okay, I think that is okay. Then we select on this, and I think we have to reduce this a little more. Let's just reduce it a little like so. We are good. And we want to make sure it's pointing directly from the circle, and the circle is larger than it, so we reduce the circle size a little more and make sure that the circle is pointing directly after it. So we have that one effect. That's our number 1 effect. Now we need to create our number 2 effect, something beneath this edge. So we can duplicate this by holding the Alt key and dragging it down. Then we reduce the size a little more and we curve it till it flows with that edge. You may also need to reduce it a little and pull it down like so. Now sometimes you might be applying an effect, it's not working out for you. What you're going to do is to keep applying some other effect in other layer or areas. Before you are done, you will see the effect is going to actually glow exactly as what you are looking at. So we are going to apply the next one at the bottom part of the 3. So this particular one, we have it at 1.5 and the size is okay for me. So let's draw this one down here and we can apply it at the bottom part. Okay, so this one also will need a dot. We now consider where we are going to place our dots. So let's place the dot. Let's duplicate this dot and place it over here. So we are good to go with that one. Let's continue with the 0. So we place this over here and we rotate it a little, squish it in, and we place it up here. Fine. Okay. Let's play around. Let's place another one by the edge like so, like this. Fine. So we are going to apply our circle to the top side of it. Good. So we are done with the basic of this. Okay, this is the base of what we are looking at. So this is time we need to change our color right now. Okay, we are applying with a color that will be very visible at first. Then at the latter part, we can start applying our styling. So select on all strokes. Here is where it's a little bit more tricky. Okay, select on all strokes, and here we are going to change the color of the stroke to a white, but not very bright white. Make sure you don't go with very bright white. No, it's not going to work. Okay, but even if you go with very bright white, what I will advise you to do is to reduce the opacity till it works. If we assume to go with a lesser value of white, we still have a poor representation of our reflection. Now, if we go with the highest value of white, like so, we still have a poor representation of our value. Now, what do we do here? Let me select this. We are supposed to apply this to all of them. So what we need to do here is opacity reduction, or we select the same color, which is orange, the lighter variant of orange. That is going to make for what we want. So let's play around first with the color variant of orange, the lighter variant of orange. So we select on that. As you can see, the effect is a little bit shiny. So we go a little bit brighter. Let's go a little bit, just a little bit. So if you are playing around with this, you see the effect now is totally different from what we have before. If we are trying to play around with this, you see this, the contrast is very bad. But we were playing around with this, we are still at the base of the color, but in a different variant of that. So we can play around. I think this is okay for what we want. If we are going to choose this, this is okay for what we want. Okay, so now we pick on that, we can click on OK. But before we do that, let's copy the color value because we're going to reuse it for the dots. Now, why we didn't select the dot alongside with the strokes is because a dot is a fill and a stroke is a stroke. Let me use that word. A dot is a fill, which means we are actually applying the color from this area if we are changing the dot, or from this particular area if we are changing the dot. But if you are changing a fill, you are applying the color from this area or from this other area. You get that point? So a dot is a vector shape that have the color inside of it, whereas a stroke is a vector shape that have its colors outside or around the element itself. So we're going to apply a fill from here. So select the color. To select and add the color value, select on this layer, and we click option from here and we paste the color value which we just copied and click OK. So we have that value automatically applied. We are choosing from a color variant that have a little grading from the main color itself. So if we are actually going to play around on this with red color, for instance, we select on this, let's make this green so that I can still show you, or I will still show you what it means. So we select on this and we apply the green we have from here. I see we apply that color, we lost that stroke. Why? Is because this particular element have no stroke and it's applying all properties of this element to this. So bear that in mind. If we are applying the red color to, we are going to apply this, it's not going to come with a stroke because there is another element at the back of this that bears the stroke, which is this, which is grouped together. You may not understand. We're applying this and we're having the same thing. But whenever we apply this, it comes with a stroke because these elements have the stroke. Okay, so we are going to add a green color from here. So let's add our own value. Let's add our own gradient value. To add a gradient value, let's click on the gradient element from this area and make sure it is selecting on the linear gradient. So you can change the first value of color from here. Let's go with a lighter green or a darker green. Okay. Then we change the second variant of layer. You can still click on this swatch element to select the different variants. So we choose a lemon green from here and we choose a different variant of green. Let's like this. Let's just like it. So now to change this one to match, select on this and we're going to go over to this part, then select the lemon pattern like this we have. Once we select it from there, click on the stroke color styler, then double click on it and then we can go a little bit lighter. You see that effect? That is exactly what I'm talking about. This is how to get a grade of the same color but making it a little bit lighter. I don't want to talk much about this. This is a simple trick. Okay, but the second way to do this is by reducing the opacity of that element. So just make everything white, click on OK. Now if you are reducing on opacity, it is reflecting on the color of the background. Let me show you what that means. So we select on this two, we go to the opacity angle, select on this percentage and we reduce it. Just watch. You see what we got there? So we are having the same variant of style which we have in the previous one. So this is white, but why it is now as though it is green is because we are having that variant of green at the background. Now if you pull this to this other one, it's still going to be the same thing as we have here. So one thing very unique about this styling, this opacity one, why I love the opacity is that you can use it on different colors. You can play around with it on different colors without having issues. Maybe you are creating multiple variants of this bubble effect. You don't need to be changing the colors on each and every one of layer that have different color. Just pick your stroke and place on a particular area. As you can see from here, I hope you can see that opacity effect. So that is how you can create that. Just reduce the opacity and you are good to go. The problem we are having is that this particular circle we created must have to come with a stroke of the same style. So if you are creating this on green, we have to use a variant of green that is darker. You see where the problem comes in. So that's where we need to start changing even the stroke over here, and also it might not match with the design concept you are doing. It's all up to you, whatever you want to do. Okay, so we're going to switch back to what we have previously. Next thing, we have to duplicate this element. Select on everything. You can possibly group it as we have all of these elements. If we want to select this 0 now, we drag it out, we are left with all those effects we just created. So best practice, select on the 0, click on Ctrl and G. Ctrl G, we group the elements. So when we use the selection tool and drag it out, we are going to drag everything. But whenever we use the direct selection tool, we are only going to drag out of one of which element we are actually dragging on. Okay, so now we have that. Let's duplicate this. Hold the Alt key and drag it out. We have number 1, just place it above it. Drag it out again. We have number 2. Just make sure the effect is exactly as you're looking at. So this is exactly how to create the bubble effect. As you can see from afar, the problem we are having is that the drop effect is more vibrant than the rest. Yes, and we can fix that. Use the direct selection tool and select all of them. Now we have duplicated this. We have to do this for all of the elements. Select on them, select on this, and we can point on this to apply that same effect. As you can see, we are now having that clean effect. Now we're going to leave this as it is. This particular style we created here is very important. We are not going to change the color. Okay, if we change the color, we're going to mess it up because we are assuming that that flow is coming from the circle, which is empty space we just created. So it's not every stroke you're going to place at the same color. So this is simply how to create this bubble text effects in Adobe Illustrator. The same applies to Photoshop. You have to do it in Illustrator, then import it to Photoshop. But best you do this in Illustrator and then import it to Photoshop. By the way, the link to the playlist of our beginner's guide to Illustrator and Photoshop will be below the description. And if you want to join our web design class, it is hot and spicy right now. You will see the link below the description of this video too. Once again, my name is Manuel from Kata Studios, and this is how to create a bubble text effect for your projects like this. We'll see in the next one. Do have a wonderful day.